Hello. Welcome back to another installment of our show, The Docket. As many of you know, and for those of you who don't, the docket deals with legal issues and entities that affect you and our community. We try to present these things in both an understandable and an enjoyable way. Thanks for joining us, and certainly we welcome any feedback or suggestions that you might have. We'll be right back with today's guest. Today's guest is Jeff Seagull, and Mr. Seagull owns a business called Seagull and Associates, which takes care of helping you, or I should say you could hire the company to protest the taxes assessed against your real estate. This is both for commercial entities and residential properties. Today we're basically going to talk about residential properties. And then if we have enough time, we may get into commercial properties. So, Jeffrey, thank you for showing up today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We've known each other a long time, and actually, you've helped me out over many number of years here. So I have some, I'd really like to keep this as basic as we possibly can, because it's not an easy issue for people to understand. Like we were talking before we just went on, to you, it's second nature. You know what you're doing. But somebody who wants to protest their taxes, and certainly they can. I'm not here, and you're here to just give information. I'm not here to push people to hire somebody. But it's a complicated situation. So let's start with the first question that I had, and that was, how are house values established?
So house values are established by the appraisal district generally based on the quality of construction using sales from the marketplace that they obtain.
And is like, they obviously are not going house by house.
No, they do mass appraisal work. They have categories for different properties, ranging from poor to excellent. And they categorize properties based on either the quality of construction or appearance. Usually it's quality of construction. And there's real estate appraisal books that establish what those guidelines are.
And who does that?
Who does?
Who makes those determinations?
The appraisal district does.
And so they have on staff appraisers that go throughout the city and take care of this and do this?
Well, most of the houses that are existing have already been classified. So when they pick up a new property or a new construction property, they actually have to go out to the property and take a look at it to see what category it's in. If it's a 1,200 square foot house and on the east side and is average quality construction, they can't say, well, this is good quality or excellent quality, because they have a guideline to go by.
Okay. But let's say I put a new roof on my house. Does that make the value of the house go up?
Not necessarily.
I put a pool in. Does that make the value of the house go up?
Those factors are determined by the market. When a property sells, if a property sells with a pool and an identical property sells without a pool or a similar property, then we can determine what the value of that pool is based on the sales price, if it was recognized in that transaction by the seller or buyer.
Okay. But so if I did something like that and then just stayed in the house, my taxes would not necessarily go up until somehow the taxing authorities realized that I made that improvement.
Well, when you put the swimming pool in, the contractor has to file a permit with the city.
Right. Oh, and I was going to say that if it's a permitting sort of thing, there's going to be notice somewhere.
Right.
There's a lot of improvement. I'm assuming there's a lot of improvements you could make without having to get a permit, so they really wouldn't affect the value of your house.
They may or may not. I mean, if you're going to just buy an old house and rehab it and change out the cabinets and put in new kitchens and new flooring and things like that, you don't need necessarily permits for it if
Right.
you're doing it yourself. A contractor would decide whether it's to the extent that would need a permit if they're altering some part of the property.
So so if I'm understanding you, the time that house might increase in value and consequently increase the taxes would be when it's sold.
It's possible.
Because then there would be it would be tracked. It was sold, they may have bought it for $30,000. Now it's sold for $200,000. They're going to know that the value of that property went up.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Because the appraisal district does not have access to the Board of Realtors sales. So they basically get their information by sending out questionnaires to people that buy their homes and ask them questions like, what did you pay for your property? Things like that. Well, Texas is a non-disclosure state. So you're not obligated to disclose to anybody what you paid for your home.
That's what I was going to ask you. So you don't have to tell them.
You don't have to tell them. As a matter of fact, you can just look at it and throw it in the trash. There's no obligation on a property owner to provide any information with regard to a sale to the appraisal district. It may be in their best interest to it if the appraisal is higher than what they paid for it. Then you have to make that decision on a case-by-case basis.
Because you would report that you paid less than what the house was appraised for. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
That's to your interest.
Yeah, of course. So when you're talking about, I'm looking at a list that you had given me, and you're talking about the category of homes, it's 1 through 6. So generally 6 are going to be new construction, bigger homes, that sort of thing.
Not necessarily new. It could be older construction. It has to do with the quality of construction when the property was built. So you have houses on Rim Road, for instance, that are excellent quality construction. I mean, you can drive by them and you look at them and go,
you can see it.
Well, that's a mansion.
Yeah.
You know, that's basically what excellent quality construction is. There may be houses 2 doors down, which may be average quality construction, that look like pretty much any other house in a general, subdivision in El Paso. And it's very subjective.
So does it go by square footage also?
They use the square footage to determine value. That's how houses are sold. When people look at homes, they're looking in a certain price range and they want so many square feet. And you have to match that up somehow, and the realtors are the ones that, pull those sales for them or those listings for them and show them those properties.
So how is the tax rate established?
So after they send out notices of value and people file protests of those values with the appraisal district, and all of those protests are settled or substantially settled, then they have a certain date that they have to certify the tax rolls by. And if they're not all settled, then they still have to settle those accounts that aren't settled. But once everything is sent to the city, then those are the values. Now, there may be extenuating circumstances where the appraisal district doesn't settle an account and they go to either arbitration or litigation after that.
That would be primarily for a commercial property, is that right?
It could be for residential. You can go to arbitration on a residential.
All right, let's just go back a little bit because, again, like I said, this second nature to you, and it's not to most people.
Right.
So give kind of an example of that process.
Okay, so you get your notice of value. You look at it. It has last year's value and this year's value. And on homestead properties, it may have another value. So the appraisal district determines what the actual market value is of that property. If it's a homestead property, it may carry an assessed value, which is lower than the market value.
Because you get the exemption?
Because you get exemptions, and they cannot raise the assessed value more than, why am I blank?
Happens to all of us. But before, don't worry about that.
It's 10% of the prior year's value.
Okay. But let's talk, while we're there, let's talk about exemptions for a minute. You get a homestead exemption. Everybody who lives in their residence, and I know there's some exceptions to that too, but let's just say this is where you're living, it's your homestead, you automatically, I mean, you have to make sure that the appraisal district knows it's your homestead, but
Correct.
you will get a homestead exemption.
Correct.
And what is that amount? Is it a percentage?
For instance, if it's a school tax exemption, the different school districts have a dollar figure that
Right.
they take off of that value for their exemption.
Okay.
Some districts are 40,000, some are 35,000, some are 25,000. It varies.
But everybody's going to get their homestead exemption.
If they occupy the residence.
Yes.
And they have to have occupied the residence on January 1.
Right. Otherwise, you have to wait for the following year.
Right. And January 1 is a very important date in the property tax world, is that's the date that they assess the property, and that's the date that things like you have to file an exemption if you own the property. If you bought a property on January 2nd, you didn't own it on January 1st, you're not entitled to an exemption for this current year.
You're right.
You have to wait
exactly.
the following year.
We pay taxes in arrears.
Correct.
Okay. What other exemptions are there?
There's exemptions for over 65.
Mm-hmm.
There's exemptions for disability. There's VA disability.
All right, let's stick with disability for a minute.
Okay.
It's basically physical disability, is it not?
I would assume so. When the appraisal district gets the information, they determine whether that disability is one of the criteria.
Okay.
I don't get involved in that. I just know that there's a VA disability. There's somebody who's not in the VA can get disability exemptions for disabilities. The VA disability is ranked on percentage. And I do know that if you have a 100% VA disability through the Veterans Administration, you are exempt from paying property taxes on your home.
And so what I'm kind of building up to, because I don't really know the answer to this off the top of my head, I don't know whether you do either. If the person, if it's a VA disability, that person dies, does that tax exemption continue for the widow?
For the surviving spouse, I believe it does.
Yeah, I thought it did. But
not, they changed the laws, on me, and then I could be wrong.
Well, but it behooves these people to check.
To ask the question.
It may save them a lot of money.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't extend down to the kids.
No, I don't think so.
All right. How often do they go through this appraisal process? Is it every year?
They are required by the state to appraise property at fair market value. So when property values are going up, as they have over the last 2 years, they generally have to keep current with that. If the market is flat, then they usually don't have to reappraise because there's no need to do that appraisal. But I believe they're required to appraise every county at least once every 3 years.
Every 3 years. And again, I guess I'm still not clear how they get their values. Because you said the person is not required to disclose what they purchased the house for. So the appraisal on the house prior to this sale could have been $500,000. The sale is for $750,000. How do they make that determination to increase the value of the house and consequently the taxes assessed against that house?
Well, one of the ways they can do that is when the mortgage is filed along with the deed. If there is a mortgage, there is an amount on that mortgage that they borrowed against that property.
Right, but that's not the purchase price.
No.
Yeah.
But if the house is appraised at, say, $70,000 and somebody purchased the house for $120,000 and borrowed $90,000, certainly
then they're going to raise it.
It's going to
the
wake
$20,000.
them up. It's going to wake them up and say.
Or they could go look at it themselves.
They can go look at it themselves, but they really can't go in and spot appraise a piece of property. They have to be fair and equitable. If they go in and nothing on that street sells and this one house sells, and all they do is reappraise that house and leave all the other homes at the lower values, then that's not fair.
So they raise everybody.
There's an equity. There's a protest where you can protest that your property is not assessed equitably with other similar properties.
Or can it be reversed? That this house sold for, we don't know what it sold for, but the mortgage is more than the previous assessment, so everybody gets raised. Try that too.
They could try that too, but one sale doesn't make a market.
Right.
I mean, it has to be, an active market to do that.
So let's then talk about what if an individual, and I know this is your business, so you don't have to give away all your secrets here, but what if an individual wants to do it on their own? And like we've started this conversation out, it's not so easy. It's a little bit complicated. But what would they do? Where do they start?
Well, the first thing when they file their protest, they should put a request in and ask for all of the evidence that the appraisal district is going to present if it should go to an appraisal review board hearing. That way they know exactly how they appraise the property, what method they use to appraise the property. They can get a copy of the property record card, which shows all the square footages on the property, garage square footages, house square footages, the size of the land. All that data is available to property owners, but they have to request it.
Right. And then you always hear about and take pictures of the inside of your house, and you haven't updated your bathroom, and you haven't updated your kitchen. I mean, is that viable? Is that stuff that's taken into consideration?
Well, yeah. I mean, it certainly is. I mean, if the house is a rental property, it certainly is not cared for usually in a manner that a property owner would care for his home. Fix things immediately. The carpet's run down. The tenant probably doesn't care. It's going to eventually be done by the property owner. If there's no problems with it, then there's no problems. But the condition of the property is not known by the appraisal district unless you bring it to their attention. And we do request from owners when we do take on a new home client, we send them a questionnaire. Which of these major things should be fixed if you are going to sell your property for the highest value? And they send us questionnaires, and we ask them to get estimates. If you need a new roof, we can pretty much estimate that. There's methods to estimate the cost of a new roof. Right. We ask them for pictures. I mean, the more information that we have with regard to the property, the better off we are in trying to make a valid and careful assessment of what we think that the property should be assessed for based on other properties in the area.
How successful are individuals, do you think, going in and trying to do this on their own?
I don't know.
How successful are you going in and doing?
Well, I've been doing this for 30 years.
Uh-huh.
And we're fairly successful. I mean, we don't win every case. There are times when you can't win the case, that the property is assessed at market value. We have over 3,000 accounts that we take care of.
Is there a possibility to go in, protest, and wind up paying more?
Usually not. I don't think the appraisal district can increase the value on the property. All right,
so there's no danger in that regard.
No, and you can always say, I'm just withdrawing my protest. Thank you very much.
Who hears these protests?
They have taxpayers that will be scheduled to meet with an appraiser, either a commercial or residential appraiser with regard to their value if they want it, if they request a informal hearing. If not, the appraisal review board, which is people from the general public.
Who appoints them?
They ask for people to apply for the position, and they're appointed by a judge.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd want to be in that position.
It's difficult to get people to do that job.
I would imagine.
We've had hearings where we have retired ranchers, we have retired school teachers, we have estheticians on boards that make a little extra money on the side.
It's a paid position?
They get paid a per diem.
Oh, well, then maybe I will apply.
Maybe you should.
I didn't realize it was a paid position.
Yeah, it's a paid position. I don't know how much they get paid now, but I'm sure it's a per diem that they get paid.
And so these are individuals out of the community. They're very dependent on what the appraisal district's appraisers are telling them.
Correct.
So the appraisal, is it a contentious hearing? And I'm talking about really houses now, not huge commercial properties. I mean, the homeowner goes in, or you go in and you say, look, I have this information. The appraiser appraised it at this amount. It shouldn't be for these reasons. Does the appraiser feel compelled then to talk back to the board and say, no, it should be this?
So basically the way they works is they have both parties speak, present their evidence, and then they have rebuttal evidence, and then they have final comments. And they give you very limited amount of time to do that in the appraisal review board. It could be 3 minutes, it could be 5 minutes. If it's a huge property, they may, may take longer to do it. But they're on a clock and they try to get these things done as efficiently and quickly as possible. The better you're prepared going into that appraisal review board hearing, the better off you are. If you can request a copy, and you should request a copy, a property owner should request a copy of everything that the appraisal district is going to be presenting in that hearing. So that way they know what the appraisal district is going to present. Now, this information is compiled by the appraisal district for that hearing. When they go out and they appraise properties, they don't do an individual appraisal on every property.
Right.
They use mass appraisal techniques. So they get massive data in an area and they come up with an average or median sales price, and they use a standard deviation, and the different classifications are ranked differently. So it's they don't go out and appraise each property individually.
Because you could conceivably have houses that are in very nice areas that have not been updated for the past 30 years. Those people need to show that to the appraisal review board.
Absolutely.
So I think we talked a little bit about this before we started taping, and I didn't if I understood you correctly, I didn't realize you could do this. You could kind of come to an agreement with everybody before one of these hearings. You could submit the information and say, look at the information I have as opposed to what you're getting. You need to lower it, and they could say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. They call that an informal hearing.
Right.
And I'm sure they have it for property owners as well as we take advantage of that.
Sure.
We're assigned as a tax agent appraisers that we work with, and we submit our evidence to them prior to the hearing, well in advance of the hearing.
You don't lose your ability to go to the hearing just because you have this casual conversation here, this informal hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
And they may say, yeah, well, we'll take this, or no, we can't do that, but we can do this. It's a give and take situation.
Right.
I mean, if it's still something you feel is wrong, you can still take it to the appraisal review board.
Okay.
And even after that, if you still don't care for that, you can still go to litigation or arbitration.
Yeah, I have a feeling most homeowners don't go to litigation.
Don't, but we've had homeowners go to arbitration and litigation.
Have you?
Mm-hmm. Most of them are large homes.
Yeah, you spend as much money doing that as...
Most of the litigation is on commercial property.
Yeah, I would think so. I had another question. Oh, the time limits to contest this stuff. You lose some rights if you don't contest within a certain amount of time. Is that right?
Right. You have to file within 30 days of the date that you receive the notice. Up until, in this year, it's May 15th.
That's the last day no matter what.
No. If they send you out a notice on May 1st, then you have 30 days from
Got
that
it.
date.
Okay.
If it was sent out before April 14th, then you have till May 15th
15th.
to file a protest. If it was sent out May 1st, then you have 30 days to
Right.
file the protest. We usually just file the protests on May 15th on all of our accounts, just so that it's in there.
And
if
you're
somebody,
yeah.
and we're protected. If somebody calls us on May 16th, then we have to make a decision. We have to look and see when the actual notice was received. If it was received within the time period that we can file a timely protest, we do it for them.
Okay, and I have a feeling you can probably only speak for yourself for this. I don't know if you can speak for any other companies, but how is it charged? So a homeowner, how do you charge for your services? So a homeowner would know whether it's worth it to hire your company.
So generally, we charge a percentage of what we save them.
Okay.
So if you use a tax rate of 3%, and assuming that we reduce the value $10,000, we've saved them $300 in taxes. And on residential properties, we charge half of whatever we save them.
So $150.
That's $150.
So that sounds like that's, and if you don't save them anything.
We don't charge them.
Yeah. So
Now, there are certain exceptions, that we put into place because some residential properties have what's called a homestead cap, where they're not assessing the property. They can only raise the assessed value a certain percentage, 10% from the prior year.
right.
And we've seen properties that they've raised, $200,000, and they're going to be raising that assessed value 10% for a number of years.
Right.
And we may not be able to get the market value that the appraisal districts determine market value down below that assessed value.
And so you just bill time.
So we just bill them a flat fee, a couple of $100.
Right.
I mean, just to cover some of the expenses.
So, and again, is that standard in the industry?
I don't know what the
Okay,
standard is.
but that's how you would do it.
Most real estate property tax consultants do it on a commission basis. I'm sure some do it on a flat fee.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on their business model.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if somebody goes, we'll use your business model, and somebody goes and says, I want to contest it, and you contest it for them, and nothing is changed, they don't owe you a fee.
Right.
I don't know how anybody loses. Well, you do.
It's just one more property. I mean, it's just, if it's not complicated, it's not a big loss. But no, we can't win them all.
Right.
We try to,
Of course.
but
Well, you try to for a number of reasons. You try to
sometimes-
for your client, and that's how you get paid.
Right. And sometimes the appraisal district has it too low.
Right.
And
Well,
I mean, it's rare, but they sometimes have it too low. It may not be horribly low, but they're doing mass appraisals. They don't go out and appraise every single home individually.
well, you know what? We're running out of time. I don't even think I asked you all the questions that I had for you, but very interesting. And I certainly learned a lot. I think everybody who's listening today learned a lot. We probably want to revisit this again. We didn't have a chance to talk about the commercial properties, which I would like to do. I do want to reiterate for anybody watching that there are time limits. So if they intend to protest on their own or through you, they need to get on the ball and do it. We're coming up to May 15th. Thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate it very much for you coming in and doing this. I would like to do a show on how you would protest commercial properties.
Sure, anytime.
I think that'd be very interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And again, anybody watching, questions, you want to complain about the show, you want to compliment the show, give us a call. Get in touch. We appreciate you watching. That's it for today.